And before we move on any further, I do want to offer, if at any time that anyone in the audience has anything they'd like to add to the discussion or question, feel free to raise your hand. And we'll try to. I don't mean to make it too formal with the hand raise, but we'll try to make it work. So has anyone got anything before we kind of keep moving forward? I just don't want to leave you guys out of it.
Yeah, I've sort of got a question, and I think you both just touched on this, but as you said, al-Bashir, he's gone back on several agreements that you've had. So is it reasonable to expect that if there was a referendum, that he would abide by it if the territory did go to the south? Would he not just build up arms or place soldiers at the border like both sides did, and then invade? Why would we expect that he would abide by what was legally decided upon? Excuse me.
Yeah, no, that's a really good question, and I think as Jimmy alluded to before, the CPA provided for an ABA Boundaries Commission to define and demarcate the boundaries of the ABA. As Jimmy said, the commission presented its final and binding report to the government in Khartoum, the government in Juba. I believe Bashir's exact words were something to the effect of, "I'm going to soak this report in water and drink it up with a straw," or something like that, roughly translated from Arabic. He had no regard for that report. The issue later went to the Permanent Court of Arbitration. I worked on that case. Bashir did not implement that ruling as well. I mean, he has a long history of just completely disregarding what goes on with ABA in terms of a legal obligation to do anything there. But quite frankly, again, I cannot imagine a referendum occurring in ABA, unfortunately. I really can't. Maybe if the regime in Khartoum is overthrown and maybe some sort of moderate force replaces it, maybe there'll be a referendum. I don't see it happening with this government. I just don't.
Well, to add to what Jenny has said, I think it's important to know that, like both Jenny and Jamie also mentioned it, that we're dealing with a government that al-Bashir is a dictator, and for those who do not know how he came to power in the coup in 1989. So, and he said something very famous, help me if I forgot it, in 1993, that they came to power through basically a coup and a weapon. He said literally. So basically, who wants to get rid of them has to do the same. That's why you found the Darfuris taking up arms in 2003, and now the Nubians, after, of course, he shredded the popular people consultation idea. He doesn't like it, and the protocol, like Jenny has mentioned, had it that basically the CPA, Comprehensive Peace Agreement, that in the 6 months period, I believe, after the secession of the South, the so-called SPLA North, Sudanese People Liberation Army in the North, who are the remnants of, they fought alongside the Sudanese, Southern Sudanese for a long time. So the agreement basically has that after the secession, they would be given this time whereby they could incorporate through some United Nations moderated mechanism so that they can be absorbed into the national army. Al-Bashir gives them ultimatum and does what he knows the best to go after them, to disarm them. Now, you cannot disarm someone who has the weapon. It's not just one person. I mean, there are probably 30,000 of them. That's one, or more than that. The issue also on the stake at ABA is not just the Nasiriyah now complaining in that same verdict of the international court. The Nasiriyah, the so-called Nasiriyah, the Arab nomads there, they've complained that they've been treated as second citizen in their own land. And al-Bashir, as Jenny has mentioned, took the side of Nasiriyah because, I mean, we all look the same, but somehow they're Arab and we are Africans. So that's another thing. What's really at stake in ABA is oil. So as long as you have that oil, even if even if we hypothetically argue that al-Bashir would have a change of heart, he's not going to have it, because I do not think for a second that the government in the North knew what they were doing when they let the South go. They did not know that they were going to lose 80% of the oil. And when it happened, the economy in the North has crashed. So there's a division within the Northern Sudanese elite and the government itself. There's some people who are, there are some cabinet positions, officers who are very radical, and then the military who think that al-Bashir is not strong enough, and they kind of taken the charge. So al-Bashir, at this moment, I would argue that he's a puppet to the radicals within the North. So basically, it's unless enough pressure has been exerted from the international community, who really understands the dynamic of what's going on in Northern Sudan, it will be hard to say that al-Bashir will accept anything at this moment, because it's almost out of his hand.
Can I just add really quickly on that one? I'm actually not, I'm going to disagree slightly with you, Hashim, that I'm not entirely sure that Abyei is about oil anymore. Because the way that the Permanent Court of Arbitration redefined the boundaries of Abyei, the oil, Heglig, which is a large oil installation that was in the Abyei area per the Abyei Boundaries Commission, was actually removed from the Abyei area. So it is in northern Sudan. Now, it's now under the purview, there's a separate border dispute now between North and South regarding that area and others along the North-South border, but it's not part of Abyei as defined by the PCA, nor does any of the key sort of infrastructure that runs up through Unity State and South Sudan and in through the processing facility in Heglig and to the north. It's not in the area anymore. So while I think that Abyei was once about oil, I definitely do, I think now it's about, and as Hashim alluded to, it's about the political survival of Bashir. He's very weak now. There were a lot of people in Khartoum, surprisingly, who did not understand that when the South left, so too would 80% of Sudan's oil. The state media didn't portray it like that. People didn't know. When they realized, Bashir lost a lot of power, and he is now mostly sort of held up by a very militant, far-right sort of wing of the National Congress Party.
Jimmy, would you like to add anything, or else we can?
Yeah, that's
again?
I guess.
Okay. I kind of want to move away a little bit from Abyei and the conflict between North and South. And so I think an important question that I want to pose to all you guys, and because we're all here, and I think there's so many different things to talk about, and they're so complex that there's so many. We could probably talk for hours and hours, but unfortunately, we probably don't have their attention for hours and hours. So while we still have it, I just kind of want to ask. Now, South Sudan's in a very particular situation because not only does it have very intense diplomatic negotiations that it has to carry out between itself and North Sudan, it now has to frame itself as an independent country. And I know the SPLM has had they've made a lot of progress in building that institution, but there's also been several setbacks along the way. And I was wondering if each of you kind of can address in 2 or 3 minutes kind of what South Sudan's greatest challenge or obstacle is to its nation building within the next year.
Yeah, I guess one of the biggest challenges South Sudan has is with the North, if they're able to, because like issues dealing with the border, the oil is like the main source of income, and so if those issues are not resolved, then it poses serious threats to the existence of South Sudan as a nation. Internally, they have tried to kind of like put some structures in place, like institutions, but the institutions are weak and they need to be developed. That I think that's something that they need to do. Generally, South Sudan has many challenges, you know. The challenges are way the challenges are way here. But at the same time, you know, at the same time there are opportunities. For instance, if they're able to resolve the oil conflict, they're talking about building a pipeline. I don't know how, a new pipeline through Kenya. I don't know how that is working out, but if they're able to do that, then they have 80% of the oil instead of 50%, you know. So that's more revenue for them. There is agricultural land that they cultivate and that provide food for the people. And there are a lot of resources, you know, ecotourism could also be developed. So there's a lot of potential in South Sudan to be able to really come out of the situation they're in, and there are also many challenges. So it's going to depend mainly on the government, on the people in the government. You know, every government depends on how much they really want to really take South Sudan and take it from the level it is to a different level, and how much they want to see the population, like, you know, have good life, live in peace, have security, and all that. So it's just a lot of work for the government to do to get South Sudan to where it's gonna be. So they just have a lot of work to do, but the challenges definitely are many. And I think another thing that would really help South Sudan is the international community, especially the United States. South Sudan came to the existence because of all the efforts that people here did and all that. And the US has been a big supporter of South Sudan. So that relationship, I guess, needs to be looked into further and see areas where they kind of really provide the much needed help, and that could help. But the challenges are huge.
Jennifer, Hashim, anything to add?
Sure, yeah. The challenges are huge. I think we could probably talk for days about the challenges. There are also a lot of glimmers of hope. I'll just touch on two challenges that come to mind initially. One being infrastructure development and two being political inclusion. First, on infrastructure development, South Sudan, by many indicators, is one of the poorest and least developed places on the planet, if not the least developed place on the planet. In terms of infrastructure alone, you know, I'm of the opinion that if you build roads, the Minister of Roads and Transportation in the government of South Sudan will often joke that he's the minister of one road and no bridges. Literally, there is very little infrastructure in South Sudan, and when you think about it in terms of in terms of practicality, it inhibits a lot. Everything from the ability of the government of South Sudan and its security and policing forces to move around the country and be able to adequately secure populations. There's a lot, I'm sure you've seen recently in the press, there's been cycles of intercommunal violence, particularly in an area called Jonglei State. There are no roads in Jonglei. It is a swamp. It's very difficult to move around there. If there were roads, perhaps that would at least provide the government of South Sudan with the ability to move its security forces to that area. There's an outstanding question of the capability of the military there and the police services to actually protect civilians, and that's another challenge. But to me, the most pressing one is those security services lack of an ability to move around the country. As well, in terms of political inclusion, we've been talking a lot about the SPLM, or the Sudan People's Liberation Movement. It is by far the largest political party in South Sudan. It is sort of for some reason the verb that's coming to mind is it was birthed out of, but anyway, it came out of the revolution, the civil war in the South, or between the South and the North, and the SPLA, the quote-unquote rebel army that fought against Khartoum for so many years. While the SPLM represents the vast majority of South Sudanese, there are other political parties. They're developing. There are dissenting voices within South Sudan. And my concern, and this is coming from someone who worked very closely with the SPLM for a long time, is that the SPLM, because it faces so many challenges in governing South Sudan, sort of has one of two major paths to go in the coming year. I think one path would be to consolidate power as much as it can and to suppress dissenting voices because of all of the challenges that the government faces. And I should say that I'm using government and SPLM almost interchangeably because the SPLM essentially controls the government of South Sudan. So, the SPLM could go the route of just squelching dissent because it faces so many challenges, the security challenges that Jimmy mentioned from the north, the insecurity from within. There are large rebel groups in South Sudan armed largely by the government in Khartoum. So the SPLM could go that way, or they could go the road of political inclusion. And I think that's the road that the international community would like to see it go. It's certainly a road that I think many within the SPLM would like to take. But it will be, it will be a choice that they take. There's a permanent constitutional process that will start this year in South Sudan. I think the way that that process is conducted will sort of indicate which way the SPLM is going. But if it takes the road of squelching dissent and consolidating power, I fear it will lose what little sort of legitimacy and goodwill that the international community has been showering it with. And that could really, I think, spell disaster for South Sudan on many levels.
There's something that you both touch on a lot, so I'm not going to go in there. But from what you both said, I think in order to get out of the oil curse, this is something that I wrote on, that's why I'm talking about it. So I think South Sudan, I was encouraged to see Self-Care sign, I forgot the name, but it's basically an organization that holds extractive industries accountable. So Southern Sudan have, the EITI. Okay, so Southern Sudan and Self-Care has come to Washington, D.C. and talked about it, and I was very pleased to hear him do that. So that's positive news. Now, it remains to be seen how, like you said, SPLA makes that a reality. And my cynical view is that basically many countries in Africa, and this is true in many other countries in the world, with exception of few, with oil, diamonds, and stuff like that, there's tendency basically to become corrupt. I mean, we have exception of Botswana. It's a successful country. It has the great way of basically creating a diamond fund so that they can secure themselves when it's during the diamond shock. So when things go bad. Now, if Southern Sudan can do that and diversify its economy, developing the sectors that you mentioned, tourism, industry, and agriculture, because Southern Sudan is not a poor country. It's really rich in animal resources. There were reports in New York Times. They've seen thousands and thousands of gazelle and other animals that we thought that they were extinct during the war. So Southern Sudan is very rich. However, if we don't tap into those resources properly and diversify the economy, there's a danger that we could have a country that basically where the few and the elite are enriched in the expenses of the poor. Now, on human rights issues in terms of women in every economy is they are the backbone. So there's a tendency also in many African countries, and I would like to see Southern Sudan to be an exception, whereby basically instead of 25%, we talked about this after the event last time, instead of having 25% in the Constitution, something you know very well about since you worked on that, I would suggest that basically, I don't have any policy to suggest, but I would hope that they would have something like what Rwanda has. Rwanda has about 30-something women participation in their political process. In Southern Sudan, the argument is, however, different, that, well, we don't have enough educated women, so they fill the slots that they should have been filled with women with some men. And I think that's a recipe for crisis, that the civil society, if it's not empowered, we cannot have a robust Southern Sudan that basically do away with all these things that we accuse the North of doing. Because if we fought for democracy and we fought and people died in 1.5 million who died in South Sudan, so I would want South Sudan basically to try to be mindful of that and try to give everybody a voice, like you both said. So that's something that.
If I just add something small, the indicators, you know, I'd say the indicators on every level, and that's what is making people a bit nervous. All the indicators on every level is really not looking good for Sudan. And the past 5 years when they had this, they had this institute in place. And during the time, you know, they were sharing 50% of the oil with the government of Khartoum. So there was some kind of money coming in, a lot of money came in. And how they use that money in terms of trying to provide basic services to the people, I didn't think they did a good job, you know. Some of, those issues of corruption, much of the money was stolen, and, so the level of provision of services based on the income that came in was not that much. And that's why, there's always this worry. So there is really big worry, things may not go right. But there is that slim chance of, trying to make it possible. But again, it will depend on the guys who are in leadership, because as Jen said, the SPLM controls everything. They're like the government and all that. Now, it's upon them to do the right thing, And then, sometimes it's difficult for you to do the right thing unless there is somebody forces you to, unless there is checks and balance. If you have all the power, you definitely are going to mess up. So unless there is that also room created for them to have like other groups, other opposition groups come up to put, some checks and balance in place, I think that's definitely something that needs to be looked into, and I think more investment has to put in that direction.
As peaceful of an outcome as possible between North and South Sudan. And while the international community was focused on, the diplomatic efforts that took, there was Bashir took the opportunity to kind of use the media's focus on other areas of Sudan to, increase violence in Darfur, and which also ended up late after, there was also violence in the Nuba mountain regions and different things like this. And so one question I, would like to really end on is, as, the international community has kind of begun to look again at what's going on in Darfur and what's going on in Nuba mountains, is they've kind of taken their focus away from the North-South, negotiation process. What, going forward, do you think is not only, kind of like summarize the situation in both those regions, but also what going forward do you foresee happening as far as, the international community's focus on those two areas and what it should be as far as, and you could focus on the United States foreign policy, how do you transition that diplomatic effort from negotiating North and South peace while they continue to, build on, ABA and other things that we talked about? How do you transition, focus back towards, ending violence in Darfur, the Nuba Mountains?
Yeah, Voices for Sudan, that's why we formed it. And since we formed the organization, we have been actually arguing, many people in the advocacy community, even the U.S. government, that they should look at Sudan holistically, instead of just looking at one region at a time, or one time we're looking at Darfur, and one time we're looking at South Sudan. So we look at the whole country and see how we can come up with a comprehensive policy that would really tackle all these problems, because some of the issues are interrelated. So if you take it piece by piece, I think one thing is just to have a comprehensive approach to the whole Sudan situation. Now, also another thing is that we have seen in 2000, like from 2002, that's when the North-South peace agreement was being negotiated, and then there was no, it's like a period of, there was no fighting between the North and South, and then in 2003 when the conflict in Darfur erupted, so Bashir took all the resources that they were using to fight the war in the South to Darfur. Now the international community was focusing on the South, on the negotiations and seeing to it that, okay, now we're having a peace agreement and we're trying to resolve the problem in Sudan. But here in Darfur, Bashir intensified war there and committing genocide in that. So there is this pattern that, and now when people are focusing on the referendum, now when the time came, people are focusing on the referendum, and the attention was all drawn there. Now we forget about Darfur. We forget about what's going to happen. Like already we have seen, the RDA was already, under occupation by Bashir, and clear indications that he was going to attack, Blue Nile and Blue Mountains. So those signs were there, but the whole attention now, we need to get the referendum. And that also gives room for Bashir to go and commit genocide in those areas. So just like, focusing on the whole country and having a comprehensive policy for the country, I think that would be the best way moving forward. And also the other thing too, with, Bashir is a dictator. He's been indicted by the International Court, and this is something. And he comes from the radical. He's not like just any ordinary, organization. They are a fundamentalist radical group, and we don't have to forget about that when dealing.
Jennifer, would you?
Yeah, no, first I have to say I couldn't agree more with Jimmy's sentiments regarding the international community and the need for the international community to treat the issues in Sudan holistically and to stop stovepiping all of these issues, stop pushing a peace process in Darfur in absence of any sort of discussion of the issues in South Kordofan, Blue Nile, Beja, and elsewhere. Because let me tell you, all the issues are the same. It's a center-periphery issue, and it's an issue of marginalization, politically, economically, socially. That said, I will say that the Southern Sudan referendum was by far, and I think this will hold true, I think, for the rest of my life, it was the most amazing thing I've ever seen, and I never thought it would take place. I never thought that that referendum would happen. I was in Juba. I was lucky enough, it was my turn to go home for the holidays, so I got to go home back to Boston for a very short 5 or 6 days that Christmas, and I came back right before the referendum. When I left Juba on December 21st, I think I left, I thought, I'm coming back, there's no way this referendum's happening, the ballots weren't in country, there was a threat still at that point that Bashir would shut it down, we didn't know what would happen in the north, out-of-country voting seemed to be a bit of a mess. I left and I thought, all right, I'll come back, inshallah, maybe this will happen, maybe it won't, we'll see. I came back right before New Year's, ballots were in country, polling stations were there, domestic and international observers were in place. Juba had this calm about it that I've never seen fall over that city. It was amazing. And for 6-7 days, people voted, there was peace, there were problems, there were definitely a few problems, but by and large, amazing. It was truly amazing, and I think it stands as an indication of what the international community can do when it works with one voice and works together and in a concerted effort to do something in Sudan. Because that referendum took place under the worst of conditions. The political situation between North and South Sudan, it wasn't good at the time, and it happened, and it happened well. And I think it shows, again, the international community, when they come together, when they place pressure on Bashir, the international community said, look, Bashir, this is gonna happen. We're gonna have this referendum, we're doing it. And we're putting diplomatic capital behind it, we're putting financial capital behind it, and we're putting a whole lot of logistical capacity behind this effort, and it will happen, and it did. That is what, and I think that's where you guys can come in as well, because look, today, for instance, and we haven't even talked about South Kordofan and Blue Nile really, but today you have in the states of South Kordofan and Blue Nile in Sudan, approximately 400,000 people who have been denied access to international humanitarian aid since June of 2011. Those people are on the verge of starvation. The government in Khartoum has been steadfast in its resolve to not allow international humanitarian aid agencies to access people in South Kordofan and Blue Nile. We are on the verge of an all-out famine in those two states. Coupled with this, the government in Khartoum has consistently and indiscriminately bombed civilian populations in South Kordofan since June of 2011 and in Blue Nile since September of 2011. Here is one place where you all, if you raise up in one voice and say this is not okay, and the US government needs to tell Khartoum that this is not okay, this is not acceptable behavior, right? What's happening in Syria right now? That situation, you see Hillary Clinton go before the UN Security Council and say, Assad cannot bomb his citizens in Homs. Hillary Clinton has not gone before the UN Security Council and said, Bashir, you cannot bomb your citizens in South Kordofan and Blue Nile. To me, it's the same exact situation. There are political circumstances, geopolitical circumstances that make them slightly different, but in the end, it's the same principle. A government can't bomb its own people. It's not okay. And that's where I think you guys can come in and say to the US government, this isn't okay, and we'd like to see you say loud and clear to Bashir that this is not okay. Aid needs to get to these people, and a ceasefire needs to happen, and it needs to happen now.
Once again, they said most of the stuff. I can try to fill the blank. Just to build.
Sorry to put you last.
No. Actually, the last time.
I'm always in the middle.
George Washington, I was at the last one. I was complaining like
Yeah. So it's only fair. So here's what I think, just to get to the bottom line of what the U.S. can do in the two states or the three states, including Darfur. We've been there before, like it was covered very well. So STAND and all the other grassroots groups in the U.S., we can do it. We've been there before. And al-Bashir is a dictator, but he still, I don't know how he did it, he still had some positive things. He was the first to recognize Southern Sudan and Southern Sudan independence, and he was also Kofi Annan was there at his last time before he admitted that, he accepted the AU UN African troops. We have 26,000 UN troops, hybrid, UN African Union troops. So that being said, I totally agree with both of you that we can put pressure on al-Bashir. He's a dictator. I've lived there, I've seen him. So he can bow down to pressure. What I think we ought to be doing that we're not doing, and I think it's just, as a country, U.S., we focus on too many problems. And we also have a short span of patience and, focus. Today's Russia, North Korea, tomorrow is Syria and Libya and so forth. So the issue of Darfur has kind of faded away. Now, we're still living that honeymoon where we still think that, the problems of Sudan and Southern Sudan have been solved, which is not true, like all of us know. So I think how to get back there and get the American audience, the advocacy is already there, but there are a lot of people who don't know that there's still problems that lie there. If we can try to exert enough leverage or power through the local representative and get to the media that, hey, we got to pay attention to those two states, we can push for no-fly zone. Nobody would admit it, but that's the only way that basically, you can stop the aggression against the farmers, the villages, women and children and elderly people who are being bombarded while they're trying to go and fetch water or find wood. And that's something that used to happen in Darfur. And we've intervened. It's not clear. It's not very we didn't get rid of everything in Darfur, but at least we have some witnesses who can report to the international community. And then we have many humanitarian organizations there. Now, that's not available in Nuba Mountains, in Blue Nile, because the government have learned the lesson from Darfur that if I do allow this international community or the so-called humanitarian organizations, the government of Sudan doesn't believe they're actually there to feed the people or help them get better if they're injured or help the women with stuff. The government just doesn't get it. He thinks that the government, especially Bashir, thinks everybody who is there to basically spy on what they're doing. Now, that's their own fault. I think we have enough elements of our power here that we can use to force Umar al-Bashir to do the right thing. If it's no fly zone, if it doesn't work, we can look at other items and we can try to at least put pressure on al-Bashir and say, hey, if you are denying that you're not doing anything wrong, why don't you open it for the media, international media? Let's have about 6 Nicholas Kristof instead of just 1. And then the world will see for themselves for what is going on there. And then after that, we could have some food coming in or medicine coming in for the people. And then we can also work for some political settlement that Lehman is trying to push for. We don't know how long it's going to take, but we can definitely do it if we can put our minds on it. And then we can try to work with the UN and see if they can get the troops back. They were there, though. In the Nuba Mountains, the UN peacekeeping was there. They were not successful. People were dragged next to their compound, and they did nothing. We had Egyptian peacekeeping troops. So if you talk to Nubans, they would say that we don't want Egyptian peacekeeping troops at that time. They're not there anymore. So we can send in back maybe peacekeeping forces with a stronger mandate, maybe Charter 7 and the Charter 7, so that they do the work of protecting civilians instead of just sitting there or roaming by and writing reports. Those are things that basically we as the United States, we can try to work with Russia and China, and they have been active with Khartoum government. I mean, they've been building them a palace. Why can't they try to do the right thing and protect the people? And I think at this moment we can have the Chinese on our side more than before, because now they don't have to lose so much oil. I think they got the oil in the south. So if we could do that, we can have some significant change in those 2 regions, Blue Nile and Southern Kordofan, and also in the process push for the Darfur area to basically see the agreement that was signed in Doha to be implemented rather than just to be on paper.
Thank you.
I just want to 3 things. With regards to the humanitarian aid, definitely that's a very important thing. Now there is talk, I think, in the State Department about cross-border humanitarian aid delivery. And there's a lot of discussion about that, but that's something that can be done, and I think we should push for it. With regards to the referendum, people say the South Sudan referendum was peaceful, but I would say it wasn't peaceful because it was at the expense of people in Blue Nile and the Nuba Mountains and in Abyei. All the people in those areas, they were part and parcel of the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, and they were part of the whole organization of the SPLM. Now, Khartoum tried to provoke the SPLM to go to war, or the South to go to war with them by attacking those areas, because they know, like, you attack my neighbor or you attack my friend, it's like you're attacking me. So they are trying to drag the South into conflict. So the South decided to avoid that conflict in order to go for and even the international community was like, okay, you cannot get into war now, and because that would disrupt the whole process of having the referendum. So the people in the Nuba Mountains, in Abyei, and in Southern Kordofan paid the price for South Sudan for the referendum. So we cannot say that the referendum was free. In terms of pressure, that's definitely very important and it's key. For Khartoum to really comply with anything, there has to be international pressure, and I think U.S. leadership is important in this. when they had the UN had the conference on the UN conference, where President Obama and Secretary Clinton, Susan Rice, they organized a separate panel for Sudan in 2010. And I think in that panel where you had heads of state come, that brought together the international community. And that's where the two sides were asked, is this a referendum going to go through or not? And each one of them said, okay, we're going to allow it to go through. So that kind of sealed the deal right there, and that's how the international community came together and made that. Now with Bashir, pressure is very important. And creation, his main thing was that the US was not prepared to apply pressure on Bashir. So what else can he do? That's why he was saying his hand was tied, because the US was not willing to apply pressure. And that's why he was always trying to find ways to negotiate with Bashir.
And I think on that note, I think we're running a little bit over time. So I think we'll just end it there. And everyone, if you have any questions, I'm sure the speakers wouldn't mind sticking around for an extra few minutes to chat and mingle. And again, I want to thank our distinguished panel for coming out here tonight. And I want to thank everyone here for coming out here tonight on our I know it's a midterm weekend, and so I really appreciate everyone's joining us. But then, could everyone just join me in a round of applause?